Welcome to the Practice Podcast, a show created by lawyers to help lawyers in life and business without all the complicated lawyer language. Let's welcome Bast Amron founders and your hosts, Jeff Bast and Brett Amron.
Are we on air?
Are we on? I'm just kidding. Nelson, our producer Nelson likes to give us
he turned it off.
Did you turn this off? Are we recording right now?
Oh, that'll get cut on the floor. Okay, let's do it. No, come on, let's go. We're on. Tell me.
Hi, Jeff. Now? Are we on?
Hi, Jeff.
Oh, yeah. All right. Anyway, Nelson likes to give us
Nelson. That was a
he likes to give us a silent
entree.
countdown, right? He gives us a silent countdown.
It was so silent today that neither you nor I picked up on it.
I really was not sure. So how are you, Brett? It's been a while. I feel like we haven't recorded a show in a little while, so maybe we took last week off. It's been 2 weeks.
You look younger, though.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I feel younger. That's my objective. Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
Good.
I do. I feel good. I feel young. I don't feel 55 and I can't drive 55. All right, Brett, I have a question for you. If you were going to teach a class, what would you teach and to whom?
That is a really good question. Did someone ask you that?
There's so many skills
questions
you could teach that.
No, there's very few. I'm not sure there's any skills that I would be able to teach.
I'm going to disagree.
I would say, man.
I think you could teach
how to put your. I think resiliency. How to put your head down in the face of whatever challenge it is, and just move forward.
Resilience. I think that's a good one. That's a great class, and I also think you're an excellent listener. I think you could teach a class on listening, and that's a great skill for.
Sorry, you said what?
Lawyers. Exactly.
Lawyers, parents, human beings. I think people do not listen.
We're getting a lot of nodding from our guest too.
I think that's right. She's going to school us both. But I think that humans do not listen enough. And that is, I think that is the root of many of the problems we have in our society.
As my esteemed partner once said, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So anyway, open your ears, listeners, because we have a special guest today. Our special guest is Terry Vento. Terry is the General Counsel to Miami's flagship nonprofit contemporary art museum, the Pérez Art Museum of Miami, or PAMM. Before accepting the role as PAMM's first in-house General Counsel in 2015, she spent decades providing pro bono legal services and advice to the museum. And she did that while she was a partner in the Florida law firm of Schutz & Bowen. She also served on the museum's board of trustees for 27 years. And now Terry provides legal guidance and education regarding best practices for both the board and the staff on governance, legal compliance, risk management, contracts, art and monetary donations, human resources, and intellectual property. She also regularly participates on local and national panels on art and museum law issues. She was named Top In-House Counsel of 2017 by the Dade County Bar Association, and she was honored by the Miami Daily Business Review with its Professional Excellence Award in 2020 for the category of Solo In-House Counsel. Terry's also the proud mother of 2 children who are both attorneys, and she's married to an attorney, so that's a lot of attorneys. Welcome, Terry. We're happy to have you.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, welcome, Terry. It's pretty impressive. We've had some impressive guests, but I'm not sure we've had a more impressive guest.
I think I also failed to mention that Terry was a guest at our most recent forum on panelist.
That's right.
And you can catch that a recording of that episode on the podcast as well. So great stuff. Terry, we're so happy to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where'd you grow up? Where are you from?
Sure.
Who are you? Who is Terry Vento?
Who am I? I grew up in Fort Lauderdale as the oldest of 7 children.
7?
7.
Wow.
My dad went to med school later in life. He was a pharmacist, had always wanted to be a doctor. He went to University of Miami, and he already had 5 children at that time.
Wow.
By the time he finished, he had 2 more. So as the oldest, I was what I call my mom's mini-me, and I helped kind of raise the kids because my mom amazingly did all of that with her husband being in med school. So one of the things that I look back now and see is a lot of the If you're talking about resiliency, a lot of the ability to listen, the soft skills you need in life, as well as the hard skills of how to run a household, I kind of learned early on. And I never felt put upon. I always felt like we were all pulling in the same direction. My siblings and I are still very good friends. So, it's a very interesting dynamic. So I started out that way. I went to University of Florida to study journalism.
Gators.
Oh, yes. I'm actually a double gator.
Oh, wow.
I went there to study journalism. I wanted to cover the Supreme Court as a journalist. So I went to law school with that in mind. And somewhere along the line, I got a hunch that maybe that wasn't my ultimate determination, because I got the book award in the trial advocacy class. And I said, well, maybe there's something to this trial law stuff. So when I graduated, I clerked for a federal judge for 2 years here in Southern District of Florida. And then I went into private practice.
Wow.
And I did commercial litigation. I did that for, many, many years at Schutz & Bowen. And when the firm was celebrating its 75th anniversary, they appointed me to find something to celebrate that would be good for the firm, but also good for the community. So I knocked on the door of what was then called the Center for the Fine Arts, a brand new arts institution here in Miami, and said, what do you got going? And ultimately, I ended up with Schutz & Bowen and 3 of our major clients pooling our resources and sponsoring what became the Picasso in Miami exhibition back in the 80s. And one thing led to the other, and I ended up being on the board for 27 years.
27
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'll go back for a second.
Yeah, I have so many. I'm glad you want to go back.
The journalism major, but with a focus on wanting to report on the Supreme Court, where did that come from? Because that's pretty unusual for an 18-year-old or 19-year-old to sort of say, I want to be in journalism, but I want to focus on and report on the Supreme Court. The
Supreme Court issue arose out of a internship that I got to work for a senator in Washington, D.C. in my junior year. And I was in D.C. and loved it. And I'm going to date myself here, but Roe versus Wade came out while I was there.
Oh, wow.
And
what a time.
What a time.
Yeah.
What a time. And so that really piqued my interest. And so I said, you know what? I want to be able to do, all of the in-depth reporting. I have to go to law school if I'm going to do a good job at that. As you can tell, I'm kind of a perfectionist when it comes to things. And so I said, all right, that's what I'll do. And it ended up being a little different path.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I think also the journalism communications major, I think is an incredible training ground for young lawyers, because just the ability to communicate succinctly, clearly, journalists and lawyers write somewhat similarly.
And interestingly, I found that the skills from asking people questions in your course of your investigative work as a journalist, absolutely similar to taking a deposition.
Right.
And you got to win over the people's trust. You have to be genuine. You have to, let them know that you're going to be fair and accurate in what you do. And the same thing applies in law.
Yeah. Digging, telling a story, listening, right? I mean, that's all communicating. I mean, that's all very similar in what we do and journalists do as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to rewind the clock a little bit further at just going back to the family being one of 7. I'm curious about the gap. How broad was the age difference from top to bottom?
11 years.
7 kids in 11 years. That is
busy.
That is busy. All right, thank you. That is impressive. And so you were thrust into that role at a young age.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So you grew up in Fort Lauderdale. You went to law school in Miami. And you get involved in
law school at Florida.
Law school in Florida. You start practicing in Miami. Excuse me. So you practiced as a litigator, and I understand you got involved in the board of directors or the board of trustees for 27 years. And how did PAMM come about? Can you give us a little insight into that? Because I don't think first of all, I think the PAMM is probably Miami's best kept secret. I know it's not a secret to most, but so many people here have never been there, and I'm always amazed and disappointed by that. I think I'm disappointed because they haven't been there, but I'm impressed because I think it's such an opportunity for people to see what an amazing museum it is.
Thank you.
I love it.
Thank you. That's good to know. So I started out doing commercial litigation. And when I joined the board of trustees, like any nonprofit board that you're on, if you happen to be a lawyer and they have a need, they'd say, well, Terry, you're a lawyer, can you take care of this? And I'd say, well, I'm a litigator. And they'd say, figure it out. So what I did was, because I had been very active in the Dade County Bar, Florida Bar, et cetera, I had a lot of friends who I knew were very civic-minded, were really good at what they did, and they were not necessarily litigators. So what I did was I tapped them and said, would you do a pro bono project for the museum and work with me on it? And they always said yes. And I tried to parse it out among probably 10 different law firms, and nobody was overburdened. But over the course of time, over those 27 years I was on the board, I learned all kinds of skills that were not my day job, that were my night job, in effect. And so over those years, when it came time to things that were corporate, et cetera, I learned all of that. Well, come to be, I guess at the time that the museum changed from being a Kunsthal, which was in the beginning where you had like the King Tut era.
Sorry, what was the term?
That's a German term for institution that doesn't have their own art, but that brings art in, often from things like, at that time, the blockbusters, like the King Tut, et cetera, would come to these Kunsthals.
Kunsthal. Okay,
Kunstalle.
Nice. Okay. Thank you for that.
So then after it became clear that there were plenty of collectors in Miami who had wonderful, contemporary art, because certainly a museum these days can't start off with anything else if it's too expensive.
Right.
We became interested in having a place where we could have our own homegrown art museum that really focused on really high quality contemporary art. And that mission changed and became the Miami Art Museum. And then over time, we kind of outgrew our space, et cetera. And we then, through a lot of luck and good work, ended up at this wonderful spot where we are, right next to what was then Bicentennial Park, then became Museum Park, and now is Foray Park. And we have 4 acres there where we have a wonderful Herzog and de Meuron designed building with the hanging gardens. It's amazing. But what I did on the water, exactly. So I learned from all of those wonderful lawyers. I call them my, quote, pro bono law firm. And even today, I call upon them to do pro bono work as need be, and they are always helpful.
So it sounds like you were kind of acting as general counsel to the museum before you were general counsel.
I was, but museum. I was in a reactive role as opposed to a proactive role. When I came in-house, then that all changed. I was the first in-house lawyer, and although I had been doing a lot of the work as needed, the staff had never had a lawyer in-house. And I have to say they were a little skeptical, is the Mother Superior here? If I would have people in my office, they would say, so someone's in the principal's office. So it took a while for them to warm up to the fact that I was an ally. And you talked about listening. That was the big difference, because when I was in private practice and I was dealing with in-house counsel all the time, you speak a language and you know exactly what each other are speaking about. And so there's a shortcut, and you don't have to go into long explanations of what you want to do and why. Well, when you go into a situation where you're dealing with very wonderful, smart, creative people who've never dealt with something as lineal as law, they think differently. And I had to learn to slow down. I had to learn to listen. I had to learn to find, what I'm calling that sweet spot where they're willing to give in a little on what they think aesthetically has to happen. And at the same time, I can give in a little bit till we find that spot where legally we're okay and aesthetically they're okay with it too. So, something as simple as signs. We had one exhibition in the very beginning when I came where it was found objects and the artist put together the objects with peanut butter. And I said, guys, you're going to have to put up some signs. And they said, okay, we'll do some small black and white signs so that it doesn't affect the aesthetics. And I said, no, we have to do red. And so we negotiated and we ended up with what worked.
This is for allergies? Is that
yes, exactly. We didn't want anybody to.
Yeah, I mean, there was some, right?
There wasn't a don't eat the art sign.
Right. Don't eat the art, right? I'm curious, at what point in time, do you decide, or does the museum decide, or the board decide that they've outgrown their space, that the city, right, the area can take on this massive project, which is now the current art museum, the PAMM? That's a big decision. That's a lot of moving parts, because number one, you got to decide, you got to find the spot, You got to raise the money for the physical structure, not just to build it, but to sustain it. And then you have to find the art. Like you said, it's not just going and pulling exhibits from other places. It's also having original art. So how does all of that come together? I mean, that's a lot.
It's
and I know
a lot.
that's a as the lawyers would object, that's a compound question. But
it's a compound confusing issue.
Yeah, that's just an incredible undertaking.
It was, and I lived through it. I look back and I see, like you exactly say, there were so many things going on. But because we had a very good director at the time, her name was Suzanne Delahanty, and she had experience at other art museums. We had wonderful people on our board who led the way. Dave Lawrence, Aaron Podhurst, several people who knew their way around the community. You had people like myself who were kind of young and enthusiastic and willing to put in the work because we had a vision. And that vision was that Miami couldn't be the special place that it needed to be without having a stellar art museum.
Yeah.
And it had to be one where the artwork was really good. And at the same time, recognizing you can't have something, extraordinary from the start. You have to, woo people. They have to have confidence in you. It's that if I build it, will they come?
Right.
Well, Dave Lawrence knocked on doors and said to some of the major collectors, if we build it, will you, participate? And many of them said yes. Not all, but many said yes. And guess what? It's coming to fruition.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the city is growing around it.
Exactly.
And I know, and we sort of touched on this before we started recording, but, to me, you can't be a major city without culture, right? And we have, that area over there now with the PAMM, the Frost Science, and you have the Performing Arts, the Arts Center, the Performing Arts Center. So, the vision that you guys had is just, obviously it's coming to fruition now. And at some point, maybe do you need more,
Possibly.
Yeah.
What's exciting is that we've seen downtown grow in a positive way. You've seen, just becoming a destination for art. In the beginning, when I first moved to Miami or South Florida, the dolphins and the beach, that's pretty much what people came for.
No culture, beyond that, right?
Yeah.
No, right.
Right, that wasn't a focus. And now we are a destination for that. And the statistics are showing that the tourists that come, the time and the money they spend adds so much to our local economy. And, with Art Basel being the focus, at least in December, that has piqued people's curiosity. And galleries are now, doing well. Local artists don't have to leave Miami anymore to go to New York or Los Angeles in order to be accepted and nurtured. So, it's really exciting.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I love it. I'm curious, shifting gears a little, for lawyers out there who listen and are thinking about doing pro bono. I think a lot of lawyers are reluctant to take on pro bono because I'm so busy. How do I do this? You took on pro bono and then it turned into 27 years or so plus. So what advice would you give to young lawyers who are thinking about it, and how did you, manage it as a busy litigator?
And a wife and a mother and all those things, if you love what you do, you just do it. My children didn't get harmed by it. They're wonderful people. They came with me to things. As far as the pro bono side, that saying, if you do good, you'll do well. I had no idea when I started all this that I would end up in this wonderful position. I didn't even know there was such a thing as museum lawyers because we, barely had museums.
Right.
And it wasn't until I was invited to go to a conference that was being held in Miami 12 years ago, where, and I go to these now ever since then, where all the major museums send their general counsel. And it's 3 days of just nerding out on everything to do with how to run a museum, what the legal issues are. And I looked around that room and said, where have you been all my life? And now, ironically, I'm one of the panelists for the last 5 years on that at that conference. So it's a combination of doing those things in your spare time. I had my day job, as I indicated. I would come home at night, get the kids all to bed or whatever, and then do my night job. And fortunately, one of the director of the museum who hired me and asked me to come join them It's been now 9+ years. I happen to be a night owl like myself. And so at 2 a.m, he would send me an email, and then he would say, wait a minute, why are you responding? I said, because I'm up too. And so it's just high energy, loving what you do, having chosen wisely on your spouse, because that makes all the difference. Yeah. And then just being patient and just recognizing one foot ahead of the next, one foot, not panicking, just keeping your calm and just getting it done.
So what are some of the areas of law that you intersect with as in-house counsel for a museum?
Sure. Well, the traditional running of a business.
Sure.
And I have a wonderful alliance and relationship with our chief operating officer, who, he teases, he's gone, what my initials are MTV. He says, I've gone to the MTV School of Law and I'm getting ready to graduate. So we are very much aligned on trying to have the museum be best in class. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I think, because I had been in private practice for all those years, I brought a mentality of excellence from legal advice. I wasn't going to just wing it. That's why I have so many wonderful pro bono lawyers who help, because I want us to have the best legal advice we can get. So running the business, of course. Then we also have the little more esoteric things, dealing with donors and donor relationships, art, how we deal with purchasing art, borrowing art, loaning art, all the things that go into the really specialized part of it. And I learned that from these lawyers, the museum attorneys group, and going to these conferences and doing a lot of reading. You have to be a self-starter. You got to do your homework.
And forgive me for my ignorance. Is it a 501c3? Is it a not-for-profit?
Yes.
So there's also that layer as well, right?
Absolutely. So I have to keep us and the trustees on the straight and narrow when it comes to things. The IRS has a lot of rules about what you can and can't do. Mm-hmm. And I have to educate our staff so that we don't stumble.
Mm. And how have you seen, I guess you've been involved in the Pérez, the art museum where, we all love, that's been open for how long? Is it
10 years.
10 years? Okay. And so how has it changed, in that 10 years, obviously from birth to, maturity now? How has that changed, and has your role changed with it?
Well, the role hasn't changed, but I think it's matured. In the beginning, I had to scramble myself. I was setting up basically a brand new situation. There were no forms. There was nothing.
You were starting from scratch.
I was starting from scratch, exactly. So the first couple years were a challenge for me. But with the benefit of those wonderful museum lawyers who I tapped and the pro bono lawyers whom I tapped, we all kind of made it through. As far as the staff is concerned, they had a mindset that they had to change too, because we went from a small regional museum to overnight being a sensation. And in some ways, that's also a challenge, because then you had to really make sure that you were meeting best practices. So I was very happy when we did a reaccreditation about a year or two ago, which I led. The American Alliance of Museums gave us stellar marks. And that meant that we've made that transition, and we have earned then the confidence of donors to be able to give to the museum money and art they know will be taken care of properly.
So throughout, and I know Miami has sort of enjoyed this surge as well, but throughout the 10 years, what have you seen in terms of usage, which I know has gone up tremendously, but also donors? Is it easier to get people to donate now than it used to be? Have you seen an influx of that? And then in terms of the art, is it easier to go and procure more art given the stature that the PAMM enjoys?
Absolutely. We actually have a waiting list now for people who want to be on our board. And of course, the influx of people from other states meant that in some ways they have to establish their residency here, et cetera. So we find that, giving to the museum helps them, but it helps us too.
Sure.
So the funding is helpful. Having a good reputation is helpful. We have a great director, Franklin Sermons, who's well respected locally, nationally, internationally. So that brings a lot of positive expectations, and that we're able to deliver. And we have a really stellar staff. So that's the other thing, is that over time, we've been able to add people in who have a lot of experience and really do a good job. We also have been very careful to try to push the limit in a good way on things like technology. We have something called PAMM TV, which is like a Netflix for our works that are not on paper, not hanging from the walls, but are digital. So our whole digital initiative is very cutting edge. And that means that people who are sitting home can tap into what we do. It doesn't prevent them from coming in because they can see the art, they can participate in a lot of our things in person, but it also tweaks their interest. So I think we're doing a good job of technology and in person.
So that PAMM, sorry, just to jump in, the PAMM TV, where would somebody find that?
Yes, go on to our website, www.pam.org, and type in PAMM TV, and it's for free. You sign up for it, and then you'll be able to, it's like attending film festivals, et cetera. It's not... The works are not on there forever. They're on there for short periods of time where we have to get licenses for, X number of months for use. But that's good because then there's a turnover and there's a whole new audience for artistic things.
Fantastic. And just for the audience, it's www.PAMM,
You're right.
.org. Just
you
want
are
to make
right.
sure everyone caught that. In case they don't read the show notes, I want everyone. I want my PAMM TV. So one last question I wanted to ask, just about I'm really stuck on the pro bono piece. When you make the call, because again, I think a lot of lawyers are reluctant to take on, but when you make a call to a lawyer, maybe a new lawyer who hasn't done pro bono for you, what's your pitch? How do you get them to take on this non-paying task?
Well, I tell them, find something that you like and do it because it'll be rewarding to you as well as to the museum. And if I usually pick people who I know have said to me before, if you ever need help in that area, let me know. And I tell them it's rewarding because you're learning a new skill, perhaps. I also treat them to lunch if they come to the museum and give them a free tour. But you then become part of a bigger community where you're expanding your horizons. It's fun. It uses the other side of the brain. And, you do good and you never know. That people say, how do I get your job? I said, you know what? My job just happened because I was doing something I loved and the community needed it. And the next thing you know, I'm here. Not next thing, a long time later, I'm here. But you can find some niche where you have, a real interest and let that passion become your ultimate desire, even later in your career, like I did.
Do good and you will do well.
Exactly.
Yeah. And if you do well, you have an obligation to do good.
Oh man, just
Look
again,
at that.
Full circle.
Jeffrey.
Terry, this was...
I have my pass in my wallet. Pam, do you?
This was...
I'm throwing it out.
No, but I was one of the founding
I know you are.
members.
I know you are.
And thank you both.
Yeah.
And we
amazing.
also, just for everyone out there, we took the whole firm over to the PAMM and did a tour.
We did.
And what a great, fun activity for the group. We walked around, and I've walked through that museum many times, but walking through with a guide to explain the pieces is a totally different experience.
Well, to see it with people that may not have experienced it before too is kind of cool.
Right. Yeah. I love taking people to the PAMM. Yeah. And also the architecture, the architecture, the structure, that place, the location, walking around back, having lunch at Verde in the back. It's on waterfront dining in South Florida. Really can't say enough great things about the PAMM. Or you, Terry. We're so happy to have you. Really appreciate you coming on as a guest. If you enjoyed this episode, please show us the love. Give us a 5-star review. Follow the show. Share it with your friends and family. And we will catch you next time. Nelson. Thank you, Nelson. Can you just say something for the audience, please?
Thank you, Nelson. Thank you, Terry, for being here. We appreciate it. Jeffrey, as always.
Brett, it's been my honor and privilege.
Yes, it has. Thank you.
For more information on this show and other resources, visit fastamron.com and connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram @FastAmron.